We begin this Sunday morning with breaking news on the war in Iran and President Trump's economic squeeze on the crippled country, as the brutal regime loses up to $400 million a day from lost oil sales as a result of the U.S.'s ongoing blockade, as Iran resists President Trump's call to give up its pursuit of nuclear weapons. The campaign, labeled Operation Economic Fury, has already disrupted tens of billions in revenue, targeting oil sales and cryptocurrency, according to the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who will join us in moments, as the U.S.'s military campaign pivots toward an economic choke campaign on Iran. The U.S. blockade in the Strait is effectively blocking up to 2 million barrels of oil a day in exports. That's up to $13 billion a month, forcing Iran to stockpile oil instead of selling it. But storage tanks are filling up. Here's what the president told me about the blockade.
Well, it's been pretty amazing, actually. I thought that was going to happen. They reacted to this even, I think, we've obliterated them. And this almost seems to be more of a reaction than we had before. So we'll see. I mean, look, it only matters the end result. And we're doing very well. We started off with Venezuela. We showed everybody how good. I rebuilt and built the military in my first term. I didn't know I was going to be using it this much. But we have the greatest military in the world, not even a contest. And think of it. They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. Everything's been wiped out. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. They have no radar. They have no leaders. The leaders they have now, it's a new regime, okay? And we find them pretty reasonable, to be honest with you. By comparison, pretty reasonable. It really is a new regime. And I think we're doing very well, but it only matters what the end result is, and maybe it'll happen fairly soon. Who knows?
Now, the U.S. is escalating the squeeze into a full financial choke, targeting all financial lifelines to Iran, including ships, banks, freezing $344 million in cryptocurrency. Iran's inflation on the cost of everyday items has effectively doubled, while its currency has dramatically depreciated against the U.S. dollar, with it taking 1.8 million rials to equal $1. Joining me now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the 79th U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Maria, always good to be with you.
Can you give us an update on the economic choke that you have been putting in place in Iran? Are you still looking to apply secondary sanctions or sanctions on Iran or those doing business with Iran?
Yeah, and Maria, just to remind you and your viewers, this began with the order last March from President Trump on max pressure. And 3 weeks ago, the president gave the order to Treasury, myself, to begin economic fury. And the way to think about that, we were running a marathon over the past 12 months, and now we are sprinting towards the finish line. And I can tell you that we are suffocating the regime, and they are not able to pay their soldiers. This is a real economic blockade, and it is in all parts of government, all hands on deck. It is the blockade that our great Navy is doing. No ships are getting through, and we have upped the pressure on anyone trying to remit money into Iran to help the IRGC. They are a corrupt institution. They've been stealing from the Iranian people for years. They have money offshore. We've tracked that down. We will continue to track that down. And we're going to preserve those assets for the Iranian people on the other side of this conflict.
And I guess it wasn't very smart of Iran to lash out at its Gulf friends. Combined with the pressure from OPEC, has the United Arab Emirates leaving OPEC. What's the impact there?
Well, twofold, Maria. As you said, they really miscalculated when they started bombing their Gulf neighbors in a kinetic fashion. And in response, the Gulf neighbors, who I would describe as somewhat permissive in allowing Iranian IRGC money, Iranian regime money into their banking systems, have been very fulsome and come forward and given us the details and allowed us to freeze those assets. So, the IRGC is watching their stolen assets for years, decades, for 47 years, it'll get frozen and go down the drain very quickly. The UAE has decided that OPEC is not for them. Most monopolies eventually collapse under their own weight. And Maria, we could talk about it now or in a minute, but this gives me a lot of optimism that oil prices on the other side of this conflict are going to be much lower than they were going in or at the beginning of the year or at any point in 2020, 2025.
Yeah, so in other words, more oil on the market is simple supply and demand. You're thinking that this is going to help the case on oil prices. You've got the UAE no longer needing to follow quotas from OPEC. They'll put more oil on the market, and that adds to the oil on the market to send prices. You think oil prices will be lower before the midterm elections?
I think oil prices, we can see in the futures market that oil prices are already lower 3 months, 6 months, 9 months out. But again, Maria, there are hundreds of oil tankers waiting in the Gulf to come out. The U.S. is only blockading Iranian ships, and we will see. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more of those ships coming out. The Iranians, it reminds me, they're kind of like the Keystone Cops here. It reminds me of Baghdad Bob. Back during the Iraqi war, you had the guy kind of spouting nonsense while the tanks were driving around behind him, and the Iranians are like this. They're not tolling the strait. We think that they've gotten less than 1.3 million in tolls, which is a pittance on their previous daily oil revenues. And their oil infrastructure is starting to creak. It hasn't been maintained, again, because of our decades-long sanctions against them. They are rapidly filling up storage. And as that happens, they're going to have to start shutting in wells, which we think could be in the next week.
Wow. Secretary, let me move on to the U.S. economy because these numbers are extraordinary. When you look at what's going on with the backdrop in the U.S., you would think $100 oil would scare people. And in fact, stock market is up in the double digits. You've got the economy continuing to grow. Even Jay Powell, the outgoing chairman of the Federal Reserve, had to admit it this week at his meeting. Here's what he said. Watch this, Secretary.
So it's actually quite resilient, I would say, because it's a positive thing. If I can have that amendment, yeah, growth is really solid across our economy. Some of that is that consumer spending is hanging in pretty well. The most recent data are good, and some of it is just the apparently insatiable demand for data centers all over the United States. So a lot of business investment going into building data centers, and every reason to think that that continues. So you've got an economy that's growing at 2% or better.
The Secretary, assess the economy for us, and to what do you attribute this resilience?
I think it's a lot of the policies that President Trump put in place in his first term that have continued into the second term. The One Big Beautiful Bill, also known as the Working Families Tax Cut, has been very, very positive. I was out with the president Friday. Down at the villages in Florida and was talking to our great seniors about no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, no tax on tips, deductibility of American-made cars. Maria, 45% of filers during this tax season availed themselves of at least one of those programs. So we had record refunds, and because of the modernization at the IRS, if you filed electronically, we were able to get your refund out in 21 days. So the consumer's very strong. Another aspect of the tax bill is the permanence of full expensing. So companies are coming, whether it's equipment, factory structures, they are able to write that off in a year. So we're seeing a CapEx boom. The way a CapEx boom works is you have a construction boom that then morphs into factory jobs. So that's very strong. And again, the consumer's very strong. We're in constant touch with the banks and the credit card companies, and they're saying that all quintiles of the distribution group is very strong.
That is wonderful. And of course, we've got Kevin Warsh coming in. We are expecting Kevin Warsh to be confirmed by the full Senate the week of May 11th after they get back from recess. Do you expect Kevin Warsh to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve once Jay Powell's term ends on May 15th? And what is the impact of Jay Powell staying on the board as a governor, in your view?
Well, I'm very optimistic about the Warsh Fed. It's time for a change because, Maria, if we look back, if we think about the Powell Fed, if we think about monetary policy, ethics, and supervision, they weren't great. Monetary policy, we had the worst inflation in 48 years. Ethics, we had five governors or regional bank presidents have to resign for ethical problems. And then we had 3 of the 4 largest bank failures in U.S. history. So I'm looking forward to getting on with the Warsh Fed. It's Chair Powell's decision to stay as a governor if he wants. I think it violates all norms. They would say that one other governor did stay. That was at the request of the president. The president has not requested that Chair Powell stay. I am optimistic that after a period, he may move on. I think that it would be inappropriate to overshadow. I wouldn't call this a shadow chair. I'd call it an overshadow chair. And I hope that Chair Powell will move on over the short term.
And Secretary, let me get your take on what took place in terms of Spirit Airlines, because I know that the Democrats did not want Spirit to merge with JetBlue a year ago, and now we see that Spirit Airlines closed operations. The Treasury was supposed to be doing a deal to save this company. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure, Maria. So this is just more of the mess we inherited from the Biden administration. In September 2022, Elizabeth Warren, who loves to write letters, sent a letter to the Justice Department, to the Transport Department, saying that they should oppose the merger with Spirit Airlines. JetBlue wanted to buy them for $3.8 billion. It would have given them much more resiliency. And she and the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was probably the worst transportation secretary in history when he came to the office. They were against the merger, and if JetBlue had merged with Spirit, we would have all these jobs that were lost yesterday. We had 30 regional airports who have lost service. And I can tell you what happened here. It wasn't Treasury, it was Commerce that was trying to put something together. But the reason we were here was because the Biden administration opposed the merger. We shouldn't have been here in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elizabeth Warren was complaining about it on Twitter. I know that. And, you have approached the U.S.'s balance sheet in a very smart way in terms of taking stakes in certain companies that you have deemed to be important for national security. One of those was Intel. And I saw that Intel was doing very well in the last quarterly numbers, and the stock reacted. What should we expect from Intel?
Intel, under the Biden administration, the CHIPS Act was supposed to help create national champions, and part of what President Trump has given this administration the order to do is to make sure that we are secure economically, and we are trying to bring back key industries, whether it is semiconductors, critical minerals, our pharmaceutical supply chains, steel. And with Intel is our national champion. With semiconductors, the government took a stake several months ago under President Trump's direction. I was in the Oval when he told the CEO of Intel that he would like a 10% stake. The CEO turned it over, and the U.S. government's made between $30 and $40 billion on that, and
wow.
No one wants to give the president credit for that. And he is working for the American people every day. So not only, Maria, not only do we have more national security, we have a more resilient balance sheet.
Secretary, these issues, the supply chain issues, no doubt will be among the topics of conversation for the president's upcoming meeting with Xi Jinping in China on May 14th and 15th. If we are still at war with Iran, will the president move to reschedule that meeting?
He's not going to move to reschedule it, as far as I know. I have been bringing up the Chinese relationship with Iran in my meetings with the Chinese. And look, Maria, Iran was the largest state sponsor of terrorism. President Trump has made the world safe, who said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They have to turn over their nuclear, their enriched uranium. He's wiped out their Air Force, wiped out their Navy, wiped out their factories, but that they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and China has been financing them with their energy purchases, and we've been encouraging them not to. And that is a topic of ongoing discussion.
Do you expect China to buy oil and gas from America?
I think what we are seeing with the choke point in the Strait of Hormuz, we now have record energy exports out of the U.S. The U.S. is an energy superpower thanks to President Trump's policies in the first term, now in the second term. And the only thing that is constraining us are the export facilities, which once again were stopped in the Biden administration. And as we create more LNG facilities, we will be able to supply the world with safe American energy. And I think everyone's going to want to diversify away from the Gulf a bit. And then Venezuela production is increasing every day. So there are going to be alternate supplies. But the U.S. is the big winner here, Maria.
Yeah. Secretary, before you go, final word on AI, artificial intelligence, because I know you called a meeting. Some people said it was an emergency meeting to talk about the banks and AI after a breach of Anthropic. What can you tell us about this issue? Is this a systemic issue? Should we be worried about AI hacking our bank accounts?
You should, Maria. And the U.S. government has gotten involved. The AI companies, they are working with us. What we've had in the past month was a step change in the power of one large language model, but we're going to see it from the other AI companies. And it's important, Maria, that the U.S. stays ahead here. Imagine if China or some non-state actor were ahead of us. So what we are determined to do is work with our AI companies to allow them to continue innovate, but our charge to the U.S. government is maintaining safety. And there is a very important calculus here between innovation and safety. And at the U.S. government, we're going to make sure that things stay safe. Chair Powell and I called the bank executives into town. It was a little less dramatic than it seemed at the time because they were already in D.C., so we got them in person rather than convening a call later in the week. And the banks are working on their resiliency, and the U.S. government is working side by side with everyone. And again, very, very important for the U.S. to continue to dominate here, set the global standard, and maintain our lead.
Absolutely. Secretary, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate your time on all of those matters. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you, Maria.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.